West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Of course, first let me thank the constituents of Saskatoon West for having put their faith in me to represent them and to ensure a strong voice for them in Parliament. It is a very high honour, and I am humbled by their support and their faith in me to serve them to the best of my abilities over the coming 4 years. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to congratulate, of course, my colleagues in the House on their successful elections, and in particular extend a special congratulatory acknowledgement to those colleagues who, like me, are here in Parliament for the very first time. I want to thank my new colleagues from both sides of the House who have reached out to offer assistance and advice and a warm hand of friendship as we, as new MPs, climb a very steep learning curve. I also want to acknowledge and thank the House of Commons staff, the leadership in the Clerk's office, and especially those who staff the MP Orientation Centre. Open, generous, welcoming, and knowledgeable are the words that best describe my experience working with this dedicated group of public servants. I know I speak for all my colleagues, both new and returning, when I say we are very fortunate to work with such a dedicated and knowledgeable group of employees. Like many in this House, I did not get elected of my own efforts all alone. I worked hard, of course, but I had the help of many, many people who, if it were not for their efforts, I would not be standing here today addressing this House. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take special note of my family, my partner Shelley, my daughters Annie and Vashti, my mom, my dad, my brother and sisters, all of whom contributed so much in so many ways so that I might have this opportunity to serve my community and my country. Mr. Speaker, the riding of Saskatoon West is a new urban riding. It is an urban riding situated on Treaty 6 territory and the ancestral homelands of the Métis people. It is where I have lived and worked and raised my family for over 30 years. It is a great community in many ways. It's vibrant, entrepreneurial, and diverse, with strong community leadership and people who care for one another and who stand up against injustices, many more attributes of what makes communities great. Unfortunately, we also face many challenges and struggles. Mr. Speaker, many residents of Saskatoon West struggle because life is simply unaffordable. Saskatoon West has some of the poorest neighbourhoods in Saskatoon. We have health outcomes in some neighbourhoods that mirror those found in the Third World. Many in my community did not see the benefits of the economic boom in Saskatchewan, and many in my community have not recovered from the recession of 2008. In my previous role as the CEO of United Way before becoming the MP for Saskatoon West, I saw firsthand the personal devastation of rising inequality in my neighbours. Things such as the impact of huge health disparities despite a universal health care, including an increasing rate of HIV infection in stark contrast to lowering rates in other communities in Canada. Unemployment rates for young people and Aboriginal people 3 times the national average, one of the highest uses of food banks in Canada, more children living in poverty, a rising homelessness rate, and unaffordable housing for most. Working people with full-time jobs living at the Salvation Army because they cannot afford market housing. Mr. Speaker, many of my neighbours in Saskatoon West wake up every day faced with making decisions between paying rent or buying food, between paying rent or buying medication. Mr. Speaker, my constituents did indeed vote for change, and the change they wished to see was an open, transparent, and accountable government, a government that protected their rights and freedoms by repealing Bill C-51. They voted for one class of citizenship. They voted for keeping their mail home delivery and restoring it to those who have lost it. They voted for removing the barriers to entry into the middle class with affordable, accessible, high-quality childcare so that they could participate in the economy and attend to their education. Mr. Speaker, my constituents voted for making life more affordable. They voted for a national pharmacare program so they could afford to pay their rent and afford their medications to stay healthy and well. And, Mr. Speaker, my constituents voted for an opportunity to be included, to enjoy a good quality of life, a home, an education, an income to cover the basics of everyday life. As the CEO of United Way, I, along with other local leaders and volunteers, have sat around community tables cooperating with governments at all levels for many years to make things better in our community. But more often than not, we were thwarted in our efforts as we sat helplessly and watched all levels of government pass the buck on important issues, claiming that this is not their jurisdiction, it was some other level of government who should take the lead and step up. Mr. Speaker, to make real change happen, you have to lead. Every level of government can and has a role to play on the important issues of the day that Canadians are facing, like housing and poverty and good health care. One way you lead is by example, ensuring that you do what you can in your own jurisdictional backyard, so to speak, to set the bar high for others to follow. Mr. Speaker, one of those areas is the importance of a federal minimum wage. No efforts to lead on reducing poverty or growing the middle class will be successful without ensuring we do all we can within our own jurisdiction. And, Mr. Speaker, that is why an important government strategy to grow the middle class is a $15 federal minimum wage. Federal minimum wage will go a long way to ensuring those 80,000 plus employed people working in federally regulated industries such as transportation, telecommunications, and banking can afford the basics of life. It is the caring thing to do. It is the smart thing to do. Mr. Speaker, entry into the middle class will be challenging for many in my constituency. Their entry into the middle class means removing barriers to getting and keeping employment and pursuing their education. And one of the biggest barriers for my constituents is the lack of affordable and accessible childcare. It is often the single biggest barriers for parents to securing employment or finishing their education. Affordable post-secondary education is one challenge. Even with more affordable education, many will be excluded because they cannot afford childcare. And even if they can afford childcare, they cannot find it. It just is not there to be found. To create more opportunities for young Canadians, especially those from low and middle income families, means removing the barriers so that the opportunities provided can be accessed by everyone. And that means a federal government willing to lead on not only creating new childcare spaces in the short term, but a commitment to all parents to finally, after 30 years, commit to universally accessible, affordable, and high-quality childcare. Mr. Speaker, communities across Canada have stepped up where governments have failed to provide the service needed for their communities to thrive. But there is only so much communities can do on their own. They need governments to partner, to invest, to help communities meet their challenges. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know how to work together. I know my constituents are looking forward, as am I, to a government that knows how to do that and to do that well. As a community leader in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years, I know what it takes to work together. I know the hard work and tenacity needed to work toward common goals. Mr. Speaker, as a Labour critic for the NDP, I look forward to working with the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development and Labour and my fellow critic in the official opposition on these important issues to ensure no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member, the
honourable member for Hull-Aylmer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague from Saskatoon West for her inaugural speech in the House of Commons. It was a very good speech, very interesting.
On one of the issues which he mentioned in terms of trying to help improve the care for people who are making minimum wage by raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. I wonder if the honourable member would be willing to consider whether or not helping out the 1 in 1,000 workers who make minimum wage at the federal level, in terms of federally chartered corporations such as airlines, banks, or Air Canada, banks, and the federal government, whether or not that would be enough to, does she think that would be enough to encourage change to allow for minimum wage to rise in other sectors and the rest of the economy for the 999 other minimum wage workers?
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you very much for your question, and I offer my congratulations to you as well. Currently, there is no federal minimum wage, and that's the issue. That's the first issue that needs to be challenged. The second issue is to have a federal minimum wage that reflects an ability for people who are in those jobs to be able to actually afford the basics in life. I know in Saskatoon, the actual living wage is $16.47. Many people who are living on minimum wage have more than one job. I think $15, as is shown in Alberta, is a place to start, but we need to start first with actually having a federal minimum wage.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire?
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations to my honourable colleague for such thought-provoking comments in her speech. And I have to tell you that my compassionate riding of Windsor-Tecumseh is driven by the issues of social justice as well. And whether it is questioning the integrity of a free trade agreement versus fair trade, whether it is challenging Bill C-51, or whether it's addressing seniors being able to retire in dignity, or children being able to be lifted up out of poverty. These are things that compel all of us. And I'd like to hear from the member, what are some of the meaningful things that you heard during the campaign that resonated that the Liberal government can commit to now?
Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you very much for your good question. On the campaign trail in Saskatoon West, I heard over and over that life was not affordable. I heard three things no matter where I was in the riding. It was childcare, transportation, and housing. If it was a younger family, and if it was a senior, it was medication, housing, and of course I've forgotten the third one. You should never do that. But I guess that my point is that those two groups really need to have investment in order to lift them out of poverty. Many people have a long way to go to get out of poverty in Saskatoon West. And we need to lower the retirement age back to 65. We need to increase the guaranteed income supplement. Those are important things that will lift many people out of poverty. And of course, what I spoke with on the doorstep often was, let's have corporations pay more their fair share. If they paid a little more, we could end child poverty.
We have time for one more short question. Questions and comments. The honourable member for Yukon.
Thank you. I think the emphasis of the speaker, thank you very much, excellent speech, and the questioner from the NDP were both on social justice, shows the commonality. We have a lot of things in the platform, the huge housing program, the social infrastructure, which create thousands of daycare spaces, the Canada Child Credit to raise 300,000 children out of poverty, the transport to deal with the transportation use, she talked about the transportation subsidy, and for seniors, increasing the old age supplement and indexing it, and reducing the age to 65, and also increasing home care for seniors. So I think we're singing from the same songbook in a lot of areas of social justice, and I really appreciate that.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you very much for your comments, and to the honourable member, I do believe that there are many places where we can come together. Certainly in my community, I know that that is possible. I think in one particular area that I would like to see the Liberal government finally follow through on a promise that was first laid out to my community 30 years ago, and that is universal, accessible, affordable childcare. It is not enough to put just extra money into families. They are already not being able to afford food and rent. The ability to actually then pay for childcare so that you can actually access work and training. For many people in Saskatoon West, it is just, we have some of the highest rates of childcare in the country, and even if you were able to afford it, it just isn't there. It is such a barrier to young people getting either back to school or getting a job. It is critical to actually moving forward and making life affordable and improving people's quality of life. And that was one place I would like to see us working better together in the future.